There's a quiet law that governs every fortune ever built, and almost no one is taught to see it. We are taught to chase money. We are taught to work harder, to network more, to take more risks. But we are rarely taught the one thing that actually determines whether any of that effort produces wealth at all: the state of the mind doing the chasing. More than 100 years ago, a man named Wallace D. Wattles sat down and wrote a small, unassuming book. He did not promise shortcuts. He did not promise luck. He promised something far rarer, a method so precise that he called it a science, not a philosophy. He believed wealth was not the result of birth, intelligence, or even effort alone, but the result of thinking and acting in one specific, repeatable way. This program is not a retelling of his book line by line. It is a new path through the same territory, the same laws, seen from a different angle, built for a listener living in a world Wattles never knew. A world of constant notifications, constant comparison, constant noise. And yet, strangely, the law has not changed. It cannot change. It is built into the structure of growth itself. Over the next half hour, you will discover why most effort fails to produce wealth, and what separates effort that compounds from effort that simply exhausts. You will learn why your environment is not the cause of your limitation, but the mirror of it. You will understand why certainty, not motivation, is the real engine of progress. You will see why scarcity is a thought before it is ever a circumstance, and why abundance works the same way. You will learn the exact role your identity plays in your income, and why people often work for years without their bank account ever catching up to their effort, until something inside them changes first. By the end of this listening, you will not simply know more about money. You will understand the architecture beneath it, the invisible code that, once installed, makes wealth not a hope, but a consequence. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Wealth is not found, it is assembled. Most people search for wealth the way they search for a lost object, looking outward, scanning their surroundings, hoping to stumble upon it. A better job, a lucky break, the right connection at the right time. This searching mindset treats wealth as something hidden in the world, waiting to be discovered by the fortunate few. But wealth does not work this way, and it never has. Wealth is not found. It is assembled, piece by piece, decision by decision, inside a mind that has been organized for that purpose. The people who appear to find success are, almost without exception, the people who spent years quietly assembling the inner conditions that made it inevitable. Consider what assembly actually requires. A structure cannot rise from a single beam thrown into a field. It requires a foundation, a frame, a sequence followed in the right order. Wealth is no different. It requires a foundation of belief that increase is possible for you specifically. It requires a frame of clear, specific intention rather than a vague wish for more. And it requires a sequence, thought before action, conviction before risk, clarity before effort. Skip the foundation, and the entire structure becomes unstable. This is why so many people who acquire money suddenly, through an inheritance, a windfall, a stroke of luck, lose it just as quickly. The money arrived, but the assembly never happened. There was no internal frame strong enough to hold it. This is also why people from difficult beginnings sometimes rise rapidly once they grasp this principle, while others with every advantage remain stagnant. Advantage is not the determining factor. Assembly is. Here is the encouraging truth hidden inside this idea. If wealth must be assembled rather than found, then it does not depend on chance, and it does not depend on permission. It depends only on whether you are willing to do the inner construction work that nearly everyone else avoids. The materials are available to you right now, in your current circumstances, regardless of how ordinary they seem. The question was never whether you have what you need. The question is whether you are willing to begin assembling. Chapter 2. The Myth of the Empty World. A quiet fear sits beneath much of human behavior. The fear that there is not enough. Not enough money. Not enough opportunity. Not enough room at the top for one more person to rise. This fear shapes decisions long before a person is consciously aware of it. It makes them hesitate to ask for what they are worth. It makes them resent the success of others. It makes them grip tightly to what little they have instead of creating more. This fear is built on a myth, the myth of the empty world. It imagines life as a container of fixed size, already full, with no room for new arrivals. But look closely at how wealth has actually behaved throughout history, and the myth collapses immediately. A century ago, entire industries did not exist that today employ millions and generate trillions in value. The world did not have a fixed amount of wealth that simply got redistributed into new categories. New wealth was created, out of imagination, applied to real human need. This is the nature of an expanding system, not a fixed one. The economy, the world of ideas, the field of opportunity. These are not pies cut into a limited number of slices. They are living systems that grow in proportion to the creativity and contribution poured into them. Once you genuinely accept this, something shifts internally. You stop watching your neighbor's progress as a threat. You stop measuring your worth by comparison. You begin to understand that someone else's wealth was not subtracted from your future. It was simply proof that growth is occurring, and growth tends to invite more growth, not less. The myth of the empty world keeps people small. It teaches them to protect rather than create, to hoard rather than build. But the moment you see clearly that the world is not empty, that it is, in fact, constantly being filled by those willing to contribute something it did not have before, your entire relationship with ambition changes. You stop asking, "What can I take?" and start asking the only question that actually produces wealth. What can I bring into existence that does not yet exist? Chapter 3. The Identity Beneath the Income. There's a strange and consistent pattern observed in people who build wealth and then lose it, only to rebuild it again. Their income changes dramatically. It rises, it falls, sometimes catastrophically. Yet they tend to return to a similar level again and again, almost as if pulled back by some invisible force. That invisible force is identity. Long before income is determined by skill or market conditions, it is shaped by the quiet, often unexamined belief a person holds about what kind of life they are allowed to live. A person who, deep down, believes they are someone who struggles will often recreate struggle even after financial windfall. A person who believes they are someone who builds, who creates value, who deserves to rise, will often rebuild their position even after a painful loss. This is not mysticism. It is behavioral consistency. Identity dictates the decisions a person considers normal for someone like them. It shapes what risks they are willing to take, what opportunities they notice, what value they assign to their own time and effort. Two people can be handed the same opportunity, and one will expand it into something significant, while the other will quietly let it shrink, simply because their internal identity could not yet hold the size of what was offered. This means the real work of wealth building often has nothing to do with strategy. It has to do with becoming, internally, the kind of person for whom the strategy can actually work. If you raise your income but your identity has not changed, you will find ways, often unconsciously, to return to familiar territory. If you change your identity first, the income tends to follow, because your decisions, your standards, and your tolerance for risk and discomfort all shift to match the person you now believe yourself to be. Ask yourself honestly, does the version of you making decisions today believe they are meant for abundance, or merely hoping to survive it? The income you are building cannot rise permanently above the identity holding it. Raise the identity, and the ceiling rises with it. Chapter 4. Certainty over motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It arrives in bursts fueled by inspiration, urgency, or emotion, and it fades just as quickly once the initial spark cools. This is why so many people start strong on a new goal, a business idea, a financial plan, new discipline, only to abandon it within weeks. They mistake a temporary emotional high for a foundation, and foundations built on emotion crumble the moment the emotion passes. Certainty operates on an entirely different principle. It is not loud, and it does not depend on feeling excited. Certainty is a quiet, settled understanding that what you are building makes sense, that the direction is correct, and that consistent effort in that direction will eventually produce results, whether or not you feel inspired on any given day. This distinction matters enormously, because wealth building is rarely a straight, exciting line. It is filled with plateaus, with quiet stretches where nothing visible seems to be happening. Motivation cannot survive a plateau. It needs constant stimulation. Certainty can survive indefinitely because it was never dependent on feeling good in the first place. It is dependent on understanding cause and effect. To build certainty rather than rely on motivation, you must shift your reliance from emotion to evidence and principle. Study the patterns of those who have walked the path before you. Understand why certain actions produce certain outcomes. Once you grasp the mechanics, that consistent value creation produces opportunity, that consistent discipline produces capability, that consistent exposure produces results. You no longer need to feel inspired in order to act. You act because you understand structure. The same way a person does not need motivation to know that watering a plant helps it grow. It is simply how the system works. This is why so many financially successful people describe their journey not as a series of thrilling highs, but as a long, steady period of doing the necessary thing, day after day, with quiet confidence rather than dramatic emotion. Build certainty, and you will no longer need to wait to feel ready. You will already be moving. Chapter 5. The Discipline of the Single Direction. A scattered mind cannot build wealth, no matter how intelligent or hardworking the person behind it may be. This is one of the most overlooked truths in the entire pursuit of financial growth. Energy divided across too many directions produces friction instead of progress. A person chasing 5 opportunities at once often ends up further behind than someone who committed fully to one. This happens because every new direction requires its own learning curve, its own relationships, its own momentum to build. Switching between directions resets that momentum repeatedly, so the person never accumulates enough depth in any single area to produce a meaningful breakthrough. They mistake activity for advancement, when in truth, the busier they appear, the less they may actually be moving forward. The discipline of the single direction does not mean ignoring opportunity. It means filtering opportunity through a clear, unwavering aim, and declining anything, however attractive, that does not serve that aim. This requires a kind of inner steadiness that most people never develop, because saying no to a tempting distraction feels, in the moment, like missing out. But the people who build substantial wealth are almost universally people who said no to far more than they said yes to, simply because they understood that depth, not breadth, produces compounding results. Choosing a single direction also clarifies decision-making in a way that scattered pursuit never can. When your aim is clear, you can immediately recognize whether an action serves it or distracts from it. Without that clarity, every decision becomes a debate, draining energy that should be spent on execution. If your efforts currently feel exhausting without producing real movement, examine whether you are pursuing one clear direction or quietly chasing several at once. The mind that holds a single, well-defined aim moves with a force that a divided mind can never match. Chapter 6. Value as the only true currency. There's a quiet misunderstanding at the root of many financial struggles. The belief that money is exchanged primarily for time or effort. In reality, the market does not pay for time, and it does not pay for effort alone. It pays for value, specifically for a perceived solution to a real problem or desire. This distinction explains why 2 people can work identical hours and receive drastically different financial outcomes. One may be performing a task that is easily replaced, contributing little distinct value beyond their presence. The other may be solving a problem few others can solve, contributing value that is rare, specific, and difficult to replicate. The market responds to value, not to hours logged or effort exerted. Understanding this principle changes the entire approach to building wealth. Instead of asking, "How can I work harder?" the more useful question becomes, "What problem can I solve that creates real value for someone else?" This single shift in questioning redirects energy away from exhaustion and toward genuine contribution, which is where lasting income actually originates. Value also compounds in a way that raw effort does not. A skill, sharpened over years, becomes increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. A reputation for reliability, built through consistent delivery, becomes an asset that opens doors effort alone cannot open. A solution, once created, can often serve far more people than the original effort required to build it. This is the foundation of scalable income, the kind that grows independent of the hours a person personally invests. To build wealth sustainably, shift your daily focus from how hard you are working to how much genuine value you are creating, and for how many people. Effort without value produces exhaustion. Value, regardless of the effort behind it, produces income that respects and rewards what you have actually contributed to the world. Chapter 7. Living the increase before it arrives. There's a final principle that ties everything together, and it is often the most difficult for the logical mind to accept. Wealth does not arrive first and then change a person's mindset afterward. The mindset shift comes first, and the visible wealth follows as its natural consequence. This does not mean pretending circumstances are different than they are. It means cultivating, deliberately and consistently, the internal posture of someone who already lives in alignment with growth, calm rather than anxious, generous rather than fearful, focused on contribution rather than survival, even while the external numbers have not yet caught up. This internal posture changes behavior in subtle but powerful ways. A person living from increase negotiates differently because they are not desperate. They make decisions from a longer time horizon because they are not panicking about the next 30 days. They treat others with more generosity because they are not silently competing for scraps. These behavioral shifts, repeated daily, gradually reshape the opportunities a person attracts and the outcomes they produce, simply because the version of them making decisions has changed. This is why so many traditions, across centuries and cultures, emphasize gratitude, calm confidence, and generosity as precursors to abundance rather than rewards for it. They are not naive sentiments. They are practical instructions for how to think and behave in a way that produces the conditions wealth requires to take root. You do not need to wait for proof before adopting this posture. In fact, waiting for proof is precisely what keeps so many people locked outside the door they are trying to open. The proof comes after the posture, not before it. Begin living, in your decisions and your daily bearing, as someone for whom increase is not a hope, but a quiet inevitability. And watch how steadily your circumstances begin to organize themselves around the person you have already decided to become. This is the inner code beneath every fortune ever built. Not luck, not privilege. A mind assembled deliberately around the simple, repeatable law of increase.